Hi, and welcome. I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, Presbyterian minister of 3 congregations in Eastern Ontario. And thank you for joining us for this week's Bible study on Revelation chapter 9. It's a really scary chapter, and it brings up questions that most of us would rather not ask. So without any further ado, let's turn it over to the PowerPoints. And may I suggest that you just pray to God to ask Him for His guidance in this very difficult chapter. So when we look at chapters 8 and 9, we see a kind of parallel structure or some kind of balance, whether it's parallel or the opposite. I'm not sure what the terminology would be there. But you have in chapter 8, well, it's actually 6 through 8, you have the 4 horsemen, and they bring tyranny, war, famine, economic devastation, death on earth. They hit human beings. And unfortunately, any age, people have been saying we live in these end times because we have those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and you can pick any year in Earth history and you would have all 4 of those running loose. Then at the end of 8, beginning of 9, we've got the 4 trumpets, and they're also targeting the earth, but they're targeting nature, vegetation, seas, freshwater, sky. So it's an attack on earth. It's an attack on the people. Let's go down to the symbol, the seals 5 to 7, the cry of the martyrs. So it's like you're up to heaven because they're saying how long. That's the cry of the martyrs. Then you've got cosmic disturbances, suns and moons and stars. And then you've got that prelude to the 7th trumpet. Similarly, when you talk about the 7 trumpets, you're not going up into the stars, you're going down into the abyss. And yeah, we've got this fallen star, and we're going to keep falling into the abyss, and out of the abyss is going to come demons. So instead of heaven, we've got hell coming into the picture. And that is scary. That's really scary. So the 5th trumpet introduces the first woe. And we've got this reference to this falling star. Now, in the earlier chapter, it's called wormwood. It falls and it contaminates the waters, making them bitter to drink. But now in chapter 9, it's not just a fallen star. Somehow it's a star who's been given the keys to the abyss. So is this an angel? And then is it a fallen angel? Is it Satan? Is it Jesus? So you've got theories all over the place. One thing though, and it doesn't really matter whether it's Jesus or Satan. He's been given the keys to the abyss to free the demons. If he's Satan, of course, he doesn't have that authority. He doesn't have the keys. God has to give it to him. If it's Jesus, he has the keys. He can do what he wishes. So either way, we have God giving Satan and the demons freedom to roam the earth. And that can just suddenly, we're saying, God good, Satan bad, but God is allowing Satan to roam. God is allowing demons to roam. And suddenly that really calls into question God's character and this plan. It's like, why is God doing this? Why does God allow this to happen? And isn't that one of the core questions we ask? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why does a good God allow evil to just reign, to roam free, to be encouraged. And that is a question that's worth thinking about and working through. We also have that reference to the key. So now let's see, the demons are free to go wherever. But let's go back to that key. And we have keys mentioned elsewhere in the Bible. In Matthew, we have, Jesus giving the key of heaven to Peter, and upon this rock, he'll build a church. He has the keys, and whatever he allows is allowed, whatever he bans is banned. In Luke, he condemns the experts in the law because they have taken away the key to knowledge from people. So we've got, key of knowledge, key to the kingdom of heaven. And now we have this key to the abyss of hell. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? The demons run free. And there's some ambiguity. Is the abyss hell? Is it the bottomless pit? And there's some ambiguity. And in part, it really doesn't matter. But people have sort of struggled over the centuries to figure out what does the Bible say about the abyss and the bottomless pit, and are there different degrees of, and all that kind of stuff. And we can see that there's been development of that idea throughout. But it seems to, according to Barclay, it seems to be an in-between place. So it's not the bottomless pit. It's sort of where it's an intermediate place of punishment for fallen angels and others. In some cases, it may be seen as a prison for certain types of demons, and that would be like Luke 8:31, Jude 6. And other times it may be considered the realm of the dead, like Hades. So in Greek mythology, all the dead went to Hades, and the good ones would go into the Elysium fields, whereas the bad ones would go into other parts. So Hades was the realm of the dead. In Hebrew, Sheol is the realm of the dead too, and you have that same type of sense that all the dead go there, and then they are sort of sorted out. So here we've got this abyss, but it's for the demons. And then we get the locusts. The locusts are released. And they're described in a very strange description. And we go, is he describing real locusts? Is he not? Are they behaving like real locusts? And in some sense they are. They're not without, there's so many of them that the skies are dark. So yes, they're behaving that way like locusts, and they sort of march en masse. But in other ways, they don't, because the locusts will destroy all the green, anything that's growing gets destroyed. But these locusts are told to spare the green and go after the people. So it's quite different. Some Christians see it as like a military helicopter. Go think about it. If John had this vision and he saw these helicopters, he's never seen a helicopter in his life. He's like, what is this? And he's going to describe it in the best way he can. And he sees the teeth like a lion, and he sees sort of these wings and its sound, and maybe the tail of a scorpion. And so they come up, and here's an example of what this kind of locust could be. The problem with that is it misses these. We're not talking about the natural world anymore. We're talking about demons. We're talking about something really nightmares. And yes, the helicopters could be military attack somewhere. This is one reason why people are afraid of wars in the Middle East, because maybe it's the prelude to these horrible things that are happening. But maybe, just maybe, there's something more going on here, because it's not just people and it's not just nature. We're talking cosmic. It's people and nature and the stars and the demons all coming together. And we get this horrible, horrible image of the demons attacking people. And the people want to die and can't. And that led, in our Bible study group, it led to another discussion about suicide. Because we're trying to imagine, what is it like when you are in so much pain that you want to die and you can't? What is your way out? And many people have such negative views of suicide. And I'll say, you're damned, you're going to hell because you don't trust God. And I don't see God in those terms, because I think for people who are in such agony, death is their only way that they see. They don't see any hope. They don't see any relief. And if they can die, they've at least put an end to that pain. And I think if we focus on that pain, most of us would be filled with compassion. We'd like, isn't there some way to stop that pain? Isn't there something we can do to turn them, to point them towards another direction? And 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 maybe we can't. And then we turn to God. And what does God say? Well, one thing we know, God knows us infinitely better than we know ourselves. He knows all the ins and outs of everything that's affected us. And he knows the pain that people carry. And I believe that he is a compassionate God, and he understands why they kill themselves. And as he says elsewhere in Revelation, I'll wipe away their tears. No one will cry anymore. And certainly, if people cry, it'll be tears of joy. But if you've got this kind of pain that's never ending, just imagine that torment. And what would you do to put an end to it? And unfortunately, for some of us during the pandemic, as we're in isolation or as we're living with fear, or COVID, has hit not just the people, but all the people who couldn't get normal treatments, who are scheduled for surgery, but surgery is postponed because the COVID numbers are too high. And so they have to put up with their pain in their hips, or their cancer treatments being delayed, or their arthritis getting worse. And they have to live with this pain, and they just want it to end. So that was our sort of discussion of what happens when all you see is the torment. But there's something else maybe that God is doing, because we've got to remember this isn't the first time God has acted like this. Stop and think what happened with Exodus. Okay. So I leave that chart up there, but I'm going to stop this. Stop and think what happened with Exodus. The people were enslaved and they're crying for God to rescue them. He sends Moses. And he brings them out of Egypt into the Sinai, the desert, where they wandered for 40 years, and they eventually reach their promised land. In Revelation, we've got the cry of the martyrs saying, how long are we to be persecuted for our faith in God? And we've got the promise that God will deliver us. And we know by the end of the story, he does. And we have been brought into our land of promise, which is paradise, a new heaven and a new earth. But along the way, both in Exodus and in Revelation, we've got all these horrible, horrible plagues. So many people dying. We've got, and the plagues that stand up the most in chapter 9 in Exodus is the thunder and lightning and the locusts and the darkness. You have the angel of death passing over the homes that have been marked with a lamb's blood. And we have these plagues, this torment by demons that will pass over those who have been sealed with the blood of the Lamb, with Jesus's blood. So we've got, again, this parallel happening now. We know the end of that story, which is that new heaven and new earth, the promise. But right now in chapter 9, with the demons running loose, we are getting a chance to see this is the life without God. This is the world where God steps back and says, it's yours. Is that the world in chapter 9? Is that the world that we want to live in? So this chapter shows us the beginning of what life without God is actually like. I'm going to go back to the screen. How is this chapter a call to repentance? It's showing us this life without God. It's the hell that we're seeing, the torment that people are going through with no hope of death. 5 months. That's it. Not to kill them, but to bring about repentance. That's verses 20 and 21. People want to die and they can't. One commentator said the idea of death as an escape from torment is a delusion, a demonic delusion. I have no idea. I have a feeling that when we die, things have come to an end, so the suffering is over. Is it an escape from suffering? Possible. I have no idea. Over and over again, people are being tormented, and they basically have a choice to either turn to God and say, please help, or turn to the doctors and the scientists and just say, get me better, or both, because God gave us doctors. But many people will not turn to God, maybe because they've never heard of him. They certainly have no idea of what God's like. They certainly have no idea that there is a way out of what's happening to them. How is this chapter an encouragement to believers? Basically, those who've had the seal of God escape it all. We're protected. Just like the Israelites were protected from the plagues that hit the Egyptians, so are God's people protected from hell unfolding in front of them. A couple of other things. C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, he wrote, I think Earth, if chosen instead of heaven, will turn out to have been all along only a region in hell. And Earth, if put second to heaven, to have been from the beginning a part of heaven itself. That quote and that idea shows up in other of his books. And it strikes me because if you are in depression, and many of us have been in depression, all you see are the problems, the negatives in life. And when the negatives are all that you see, then you get that hopelessness and that desire to escape no matter what. It's the pain that never goes away. If we end up in hell, we're going to look back at our life, and that's the only thing we'll see. We'll see every hurt we've ever experienced. We'll see every time someone cheated us. We'll see every time someone abused us or swindled us or cheated us or punished us unjustly. That's all we're going to see in life. We're going to say, never known a moment's happiness. People who deal with depression, people in depression, know one of the ways to help people is get them to look around and find a blessing in their life. Start seeing the little blessings. If you can find something to be thankful for, then your perspective of earth is going to change. Your perspective of your problem is going to change. So you start to see good things. And when you look back on your life, all you're going to remember are, the time your grandparents played with you, or how your father snuck you out one time to get you an ice cream cone when he wasn't allowed to drive because he had a heart attack. Yes, it happened. All these blessings and beautiful memories you have of love in action, people caring, helping one another, good things in life. And those memories flood over. And when you've got so many good memories, the bad memories just go away. So the people who end up in heaven, who see the good things in life, when they look back at their life, they've been in heaven all along. They know bad things happen, but what they're going to remember are all the good things. Just think, if it's a family outing and you laugh around and joke with some of the things that happened when you were kids, and you're sharing the stories, and it's not stories where people get hurt or embarrassed, but they're the family collective. And that's what's going to happen for those who are in heaven. And for those who are in hell, they look back and they'll never remember a time when anyone took any interest in them or helped them or treated them kindly. They've been in hell their whole time. It's amazing what our memories do. And as Christians, we're called, one of the things that I believe we're called to do is to give thanks for our blessings, to look for our blessings every day, because that is part of the protection. against the demons, even. The other thing that comes out of this chapter, or these two chapters, is the film Seventh Seal. And it was an Ingmar Bergman film. And it's set in a historical past. So historically, the narrative places itself sometime around the Middle Ages because it's the time of the Crusades. And a knight is returning from Israel and Judea, whatever you called it back then, and is heading back home to be with his family. Now, he's bringing the plague with him. Now, the plague is from the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, and it was a much more depressed period of life because the plague just devastated Europe. So you've got sort of the trigger event is from the Middle Ages, but the other event is from the Renaissance time type thing. And they're woven together in this story of this warrior who wants to get home, and he wants to have done something that was meaningful in his life. Because war, I don't know where it's meaningful for who, but for the soldiers fighting, it's often just a fight to stay alive. There's nothing meaningful about it. And death is there, of course, to take him because he has the plague. And so they enter into an agreement, a game. They're going to play chess. And death can take the soldier's soul, let him die, when the chess game is finished. And so the movie moves as they're traveling around, encountering people, spreading the plague. And they meet a holy family. There's Joseph and Mary and the baby Michael. And Joseph has visions. And he actually sees death and the knight playing chess. And he realizes what's happening. So he takes the holy family and flees. So we've got this biblical narrative going in there too. And death is going to catch them. And so the knight knocks the chess pieces off the board, and so they get put back on. Death has been distracted. The Holy Family manages to escape. And Death asks him, has your life been meaningful? Have you found your meaningful deed? And the knight says yes. So that one overriding desire of the knight's been filled. He does get home, and they die, and they're led into this danse macabre, dance of the dead, into the twilight. So just want to close this session, this study of chapter 9, with a scene from the Seventh Seal. Time runs out. We have very little time to decide. Are we on the white or the black? Are we on God's side or not? Which will we choose? And that will affect our fate. Stay tuned for chapter 10. Once again, I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, and thank you for joining us for this week's study on Revelation chapter 9.